I have seen a great deal in my 43 years on the bench. I have watched people lie directly to my face, cry crocodile tears, and attempt every trick imaginable to escape justice. But never, in all my decades wearing this robe, had anyone pointed a loaded weapon at me inside my own courtroom, until the morning of February 13th, 2025, at exactly 10:17 a.m., when Police Chief Robert Morrison walked into my Providence courtroom and made the gravest mistake of his entire career. You may think you have heard wild courtroom stories before. Trust me, nothing could have prepared you for this one. This story spread so rapidly that it made international news across 47 countries. The courtroom security footage was viewed more than 35 million times. Legal experts analyzed every second of it. And the question on everyone's mind remained the same. How did a decorated police chief with 28 years of service end up pointing a loaded gun at a sitting judge in open court? Let me take you back to where it all began. It was a cold Thursday morning in Providence, Rhode Island. February in New England means winter, and that morning the temperature sat at 23 degrees, with wind chill making it feel like 10 below. My clerk handed me a file that appeared straightforward enough on the surface. Case number 2-025-CV-4821 was a civil complaint for excessive force during a traffic stop. The plaintiff was James Michael Patterson, 24 years old, a senior at Rhode Island College studying business administration. He had a clean record with no criminal history, not even a parking ticket beyond one citation from 2022 that he had paid immediately. James lived with his grandmother, Sarah Patterson, in South Providence, in a small two-bedroom apartment on Prairie Avenue. He worked part-time at Target, 25 hours a week, while carrying a full academic course load. His co-workers described him as reliable and polite. His professors said he was hard-working, the kind of student who showed up to every class and submitted every assignment on time. The defendant was Officer Derek James Morrison, 32 years old, a patrol officer with the Providence Police Department, badge number 2847. He had 6 years on the force and a solid record up to this point, 23 commendations for good police work and 2 letters of appreciation from members of the public. He had made over 400 arrests during his 6 years of service. His personnel file showed no complaints, no excessive force allegations, and no disciplinary actions. On paper, he appeared to be a good officer. But Derek Morrison had one very significant advantage that most police officers do not have. His father was Police Chief Robert Thomas Morrison, the head of the Providence Police Department for the previous 5 years. Chief Morrison was 56 years old. He had joined the Providence Police Department in 1997, right after graduating from Boston University with a degree in criminal justice. He worked patrol for 3 years, then became a detective and spent 8 years in investigations. He made sergeant in 2008, lieutenant in 2012, captain in 2016, and in January 2020, he was appointed chief of police, overseeing 478 sworn officers and 142 civilian employees. By all accounts, he ran a disciplined and effective department. Crime rates had dropped 14% during his tenure. Officer morale was high. The mayor praised him regularly. He had earned multiple awards from civic organizations. But success and power have a way of changing people. They can cause a person to forget that a badge is meant to represent service, not privilege. On November 8, 2024, at approximately 9:47 p.m., James Patterson was driving home from his shift at Target. He was exhausted. He had worked 8 hours after attending 3 classes that day. He simply wanted to get home, eat something, study for an hour, and sleep. He was driving his 2012 Honda Civic southbound on Broad Street. The car was old but reliable. He had purchased it used for $4,800 2 years earlier and maintained it carefully because he could not afford unexpected repairs. He was obeying every traffic law, traveling at the posted speed limit, using his turn signals, and keeping both hands on the steering wheel. His grandmother had taught him to be especially careful while driving as a young black man. She had given him the talk that so many black parents give their children. Keep your hands visible. Do not make sudden movements. Say yes, sir, and no, sir. Follow every instruction. Do not give them any reason to escalate. At 9:47 p.m., Officer Derek Morrison, behind the wheel of Patrol Car 847, pulled up behind James's Honda and activated his lights, red and blue flashing in the rearview mirror. James's heart sank. He had not done anything wrong. He knew he had not. But when a police officer pulls you over, you comply. You do not argue. You follow instructions and hope everything goes smoothly. James pulled over immediately, put the car in park, turned off the engine, rolled down his window, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 position, clearly visible, exactly as his grandmother had taught him. Officer Derek Morrison approached the vehicle. According to the dash cam footage that would later be presented in court, he was aggressive from the very beginning. His body language was hostile. His tone was confrontational, and his first words to James were not "good evening" or "license and registration, please." His first words were, "Do you know why I pulled you over, boy?" Not sir, not young man, boy. Anyone familiar with American history understands the weight that word carries when spoken by a white police officer to a young black man. James remained calm. He said, "No, sir, I do not. Was I speeding?" His voice was polite and respectful. His license and registration were already in his hand, ready to be handed over. Officer Morrison shone his flashlight directly into James's face, temporarily blinding him, then said, "Do not ask me questions. I ask the questions. License and registration, now." James held them out, and Morrison snatched them from his hand before walking back to his patrol car to run the information. Everything came back clean. No warrants, no outstanding violations, nothing. Most traffic stops end right there. The officer returns, issues a warning or a ticket, and sends the driver on his way, 5 minutes at most. That is not what happened. Officer Morrison returned to the vehicle and said, "Step out of the car." James asked, "Sir, may I ask why? Did I do something wrong?" It was a reasonable question. Every citizen has the right to ask it. But Officer Morrison did not see it that way. He interpreted it as defiance, disrespect, and a challenge to his authority. He yanked the car door open, grabbed James by his jacket, and physically dragged him out of the vehicle. James stumbled and tried to regain his balance, raising his hands to show he was not a threat. "I was not resisting," James would later testify. "I did not fight back. I just tried not to fall." Officer Morrison spun James around and slammed him face first against the side of the Honda with enough force that the impact was clearly audible on the dashcam recording. You could hear James grunt in pain. You could see his head strike the car door. Morrison then grabbed James's arm, twisted it behind his back, and forced him down to the cold November pavement, first to his knees, then onto his stomach. Morrison placed his knee between James's shoulder blades and pressed down with his full body weight. "I cannot breathe," James said. His words were captured clearly on the dashcam audio. "Sir, please, I cannot breathe. What did I do? Please, just tell me what I did wrong." Officer Morrison did not respond. He kept his knee on James's back and held him pinned to the ground for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I know the exact duration because the dash cam footage contains a timestamp running from 9:51:33 to 9:55:50, 4 minutes and 17 seconds of a young man lying face down on freezing pavement, begging to be told what he had done wrong, receiving no answer. At 9:55 p.m., a second patrol car arrived. Officer Sarah Kim, badge number 3194, with 7 years on the force, stepped out and immediately asked what was happening. "What do we have, Derek? Is he under arrest?" Morrison, knee still on James's back, replied, "Just being difficult, not following commands." Officer Kim looked at James on the ground, then back at Morrison and said, "Derek, if he is not under arrest, why is he on the ground? Let him up." Morrison hesitated for about 5 seconds. Then he removed his knee and pulled James to his feet. James was weeping openly. His face was scraped from being pressed into the pavement. His jacket was torn. His hands were bleeding from where he had tried to shield his face. His ribs ached so badly that breathing was painful. Officer Kim asked James whether he needed medical attention. James said he believed his ribs were injured and that it hurt to breathe. Kim immediately called for an ambulance. James was transported to Rhode Island Hospital. X-rays revealed 2 bruised ribs, significant bruising across his back, multiple facial abrasions, and signs of psychological trauma documented by the emergency room physician. Here is the most important detail. James Patterson was never charged with anything, not resisting arrest because he was never under arrest, not assaulting an officer because he never touched Officer Morrison. Not even the broken taillight that Morrison would later claim was the reason for the stop. When James's car was examined the following day, every light was functioning perfectly. There was no legitimate reason for the stop, no legitimate reason for the use of force, no legitimate reason for any of it. James's grandmother, Sarah, was not a woman who backed down from a fight. She had raised James since he was 6 years old, after his parents were killed in a car accident. She had worked 2 jobs to keep him fed, clothed, and in school. And she was not about to let what had happened to her grandson go unanswered. She found an attorney, Maria Rodriguez from Rhode Island Legal Services. Maria took cases like this because she believed in justice, not because they were financially rewarding. She believed that someone had to stand up for people who could not afford $500 an hour legal representation. Together, they filed a civil complaint against Officer Derek Morrison for excessive force, violation of civil rights, assault and battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They had the dash cam video. They had the hospital records. They had James's testimony and Officer Kim's report. The case appeared straightforward, but there was a complication. Derek Morrison's father was the chief of police, and Chief Morrison had no intention of allowing his son to face consequences. The first sign came when Maria attempted to schedule Officer Morrison's deposition. She arranged it 3 separate times. All 3 times, Morrison's attorney canceled at the last minute. A scheduling conflict, the client being unavailable, a request for more preparation time. Then Maria began receiving phone calls. Nothing that could be called an explicit threat, just carefully worded suggestions. A senior partner at a prominent firm mentioned that perhaps this case was not worth pursuing. A city councilman implied that making enemies of the police department could prove damaging to her career. The message was unmistakable. Drop the case and walk away. Maria Rodriguez did not drop it. She pushed forward. She filed motions, gathered additional evidence, and scheduled the matter for trial. And that is how we arrived in my courtroom on the morning of February 13th, 2025. When Derek Morrison walked through those courtroom doors at 10:15 a.m., his confidence was immediately apparent. He wore a suit, not expensive, but clean and well-pressed. He had the look of a man who expected to win. But Derek Morrison had not come alone. Behind him walked his father, Chief Robert Morrison. And behind the chief walked 6 uniformed Providence police officers. Chief Morrison was dressed in his full dress uniform, not the standard duty uniform, but the formal dress blues reserved for ceremonies and official occasions. Every medal was pinned to his chest, every commendation ribbon on display. The uniform was immaculate, pressed with military precision, his shoes polished to a mirror finish. This was not a father coming to support his son. This was a deliberate show of force. A police chief walking into a courtroom with 6 uniformed officers at his back was a message. Remember who you are dealing with. The 6 officers took positions at the back of the courtroom in a single line, arms crossed, expressions neutral. A wall of badges and blue uniforms, a reminder that law enforcement and the courts operate in the same system. I have been a judge for 43 years. I have witnessed intimidation attempts before. They do not work on me. James Patterson sat at the plaintiff's table with Maria Rodriguez. He was wearing a borrowed suit, slightly too large in the shoulders, with sleeves that were a bit too long. But he had made the effort. His grandmother, Sarah, sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap, her eyes on her grandson. I called the court to order. Case number 2025-CV-4821. James Patterson versus Derek Morrison. Are both parties ready? Maria Rodriguez rose and stated she was ready. Derek Morrison's attorney, Jonathan Peaton from a downtown firm, rose and confirmed the same. I asked Maria to present her case. She stood and laid it out clearly and precisely. On November 8, 2024, her client, James Patterson, had been pulled over by Officer Derek Morrison for no apparent reason. The dashcam footage showed no traffic violation. When James asked why he was being stopped, Morrison responded with immediate physical force, pulling him from the vehicle, slamming him against the car, and forcing him to the ground. Morrison kept his knee on James's back for more than 4 minutes, while James pleaded to know what he had done wrong. Maria entered the dashcam footage into evidence, along with hospital records, Officer Kim's report, and all supporting documentation. Then we watched the video. I had reviewed it previously, but seeing it again in the courtroom made it more difficult, not less. Every detail was visible. Morrison's aggressive approach, the moment he grabbed James, the sound of James's body striking the car door, James on the ground, hands clearly visible, not resisting. Morrison's knee pressed into his back, James crying and repeating, "Please, sir, I cannot breathe. What did I do?" When the video ended, the courtroom fell silent. I looked at the 6 officers standing at the back. None of them were looking at the screen. Some stared at the floor, others at the ceiling. Anywhere except at the evidence in front of them. I looked at James Patterson, tears on his face, his grandmother's arm around his shoulders. I looked at Derek Morrison, staring straight ahead with no expression and no sign of remorse. I asked Officer Morrison whether he wished to explain his conduct. His attorney began to rise, but Morrison waved him off. A dismissive gesture, as though swatting away an inconvenience. Morrison stood and said, "Your Honor, I initiated a traffic stop because I observed what I believed to be a defective taillight." Mr. Patterson was argumentative and non-compliant. I applied the minimum necessary force to gain compliance and ensure officer safety. Everything I did was consistent with my training and departmental policy. I have heard many justifications in 43 years, but this one was particularly troubling, given that every person in that courtroom had just watched the footage. I replied, "Officer Morrison, we have just viewed the recording. Mr. Patterson asked why he was being pulled over. That is not being argumentative. That is a citizen exercising a basic legal right." Morrison responded, "Your Honor, with respect, you are not a police officer. You do not understand what it is like to make split-second decisions. When a subject challenges your authority, you must establish control immediately or the situation can escalate. Establish control by slamming a compliant civilian against his own vehicle." Morrison continued, "I did what I was trained to do." That is when Chief Robert Morrison rose to his feet. He did not wait to be recognized by the court. He did not request permission to speak. He simply stood up and began talking. "Your Honor, I believe some context is needed here. My son has served as a police officer for 6 years. He has made over 400 arrests. He has taken weapons and narcotics off our streets. He has received 23 commendations. He represents the very best that the Providence Police Department has to offer." I allowed him to finish. Then I said, "Chief Morrison, I acknowledge your son's service record. However, that is not the matter before this court. We are here to address the events of November 8th, and the evidence on that point is clear." Chief Morrison's expression shifted. The professional composure disappeared. What replaced it was colder and harder. "Your Honor, I think you need to understand something. The Providence Police Department and the court system share a working relationship. My officers bring cases to your courts every day. They testify, they enforce your judgments. This system only functions if there is mutual respect between institutions." The courtroom went absolutely still. Everyone present understood what was happening. The chief of police was threatening a judge, carefully, professionally, but threatening him nonetheless. I said, "Chief Morrison, are you attempting to influence this court's decision in this matter?" He smiled, not warmly. "I am not attempting anything, Your Honor. I am simply ensuring that you understand the broader picture. My son is a good officer. If you rule against him, you send a message that officers cannot perform their duties. That will have consequences. for police-court relations, for public safety, for this entire community. I rose from my seat. Chief Morrison, you are in contempt of court. You are attempting to intimidate this court. Sit down immediately, or you will be removed from this room. He did not sit. He laughed. Removed by whom? Your one bailiff? I have 6 officers in this room, officers who answer to me. Do you genuinely believe they will arrest their own chief? My senior bailiff, Officer Marcus Thompson, a former Marine with 20 years of service, stepped forward with his hand on his service weapon. But the situation was clear to everyone in the room. One bailiff against 7 law enforcement officers. I said, Chief Morrison, this is your final warning. Sit down now or you will be placed under arrest. Chief Morrison stepped forward closer to my bench. Or what, Judge? What exactly are you going to do? You are a judge. You handle traffic matters and civil disputes. I command a department of 478 officers. I speak with the mayor regularly. The governor knows me by name. I have real power. What do you have? I have the law, I said, and that is the only authority that matters in this courtroom. Officer Thompson moved to place Chief Morrison under arrest. My other 2 bailiffs, Officers Jennifer Park and David Rodriguez, moved forward as well. And that is when Chief Robert Morrison made the decision that destroyed his life. His hand moved to his hip, to his service weapon, a Glock 19, 9mm. He drew it in a single fluid motion, the movement of someone who has performed it thousands of times. But he did not point it at Officer Thompson. He pointed it directly at me, at my chest. From approximately 15 feet away, a loaded firearm aimed at a sitting judge inside a courtroom full of people. Time seemed to stop. Everything slowed down. I could see the weapon clearly, the dark metal, the barrel, his finger resting on the trigger guard, not on the trigger yet, but dangerously close. Then Sergeant Linda Chen, who was stationed near the side entrance, drew her own weapon and issued a command. Chief Morrison, put the weapon down. Put it down now. He did not comply. His eyes stayed on me. His arm did not drop. Sergeant Chen fired 1 round. From the moment Chief Morrison drew his weapon to the moment Sergeant Chen discharged hers, exactly 45 seconds elapsed. The courtroom security cameras captured every frame with precise timestamps. 45 seconds that felt like 45 years. 45 seconds that ended a career and proved beyond any doubt that no one stands above the law. The ambulance arrived in under 3 minutes. Paramedics rushed in. Morrison was conscious, in considerable pain and bleeding, but alive. The round had struck him in the upper right chest, serious but not immediately fatal. As he was wheeled past me on the stretcher, he looked up, made eye contact, and mouthed words in my direction. A final threat, but it was empty. He was finished. After the ambulance left, I called a 15-minute recess. I went to my chambers and allowed myself to process what had just happened. Someone had drawn a loaded weapon and aimed it at me. My hands were shaking. Sergeant Chen came to my door. She looked devastated. Your Honor, I am sorry. I did not want to shoot him, but he was going to kill you. I could see his finger moving toward the trigger. I stood up and looked at her directly. Sergeant Chen, you have nothing to apologize for. You warned him. You gave him every opportunity to stand down. When he posed an immediate lethal threat, you acted to protect this court. You saved my life. You are a hero. After composing myself, I returned to the courtroom. Media crews were already gathering outside the building. Word had spread with remarkable speed. But I had unfinished business. I called the case back to order. I entered a finding of liability against Officer Derek Morrison on all counts: excessive force, violation of civil rights, assault, and battery. I awarded James Patterson $3.2 million in damages. But before adjourning, I wanted something on the record. I stated that James Patterson represented everything admirable about this community. A hardworking young man attending college, holding down a job, and building a future for himself. A young man who broke no laws, harmed no one, and threatened no one. I stated that Officer Derek Morrison had represented an abuse of the authority entrusted to him, using his badge not to protect, but to intimidate. And I stated that Chief Robert Morrison had represented something far more corrosive, a man who believed his position placed him beyond accountability, who thought he could threaten and bully his way out of consequences, and who was ultimately willing to point a loaded weapon at a judge to shield his son from justice. The aftermath was significant and swift. Chief Morrison survived surgery and made a full physical recovery. He was charged with 14 federal felonies, including assault on a judicial officer with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. His trial lasted 3 weeks. The courtroom footage was played multiple times before the jury. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning unanimous guilty verdicts on all counts. The presiding federal judge sentenced Morrison to 25 years in federal prison. He was 56 years old at sentencing. He will be 81 before he becomes eligible for parole. His pension was revoked. His law enforcement certification was permanently stripped. He lost everything. Officer Derek Morrison was terminated from the Providence Police Department, lost his pension, was criminally charged for the assault on James Patterson, and received a sentence of 3 years in prison. Sergeant Linda Chen was promoted to lieutenant and then to captain. She was under serious consideration for the position of chief of police when the interim chief retired. She became a recognized national figure, was featured on 60 Minutes, and was called to testify before Congress on the subject of police accountability. And James Patterson graduated from Rhode Island College with honors. He used a portion of his settlement to establish a nonprofit organization called Justice for All Providence, which assists victims of police misconduct in navigating the legal system and connects them with support and resources. He is doing meaningful work. Here is what 43 years on the bench have taught me. Justice is not automatic. It does not simply happen because laws and courts exist. Justice happens because people choose to make it happen. People like Sergeant Chen, who refused to follow an unlawful order, who chose the law over personal loyalty, who risked everything to do what was right. People like Officer Thompson, who put himself in harm's way to protect others. People like James Patterson, who refused to allow injustice to go unanswered and who stood up even when doing so was frightening. My father once told me that the courtroom is the last place where every person stands truly equal. In the rest of the world, wealth, power, and connections buy advantages. But in a courtroom, standing before justice, none of that is supposed to matter. It is simply you, the law, and the truth. I have spent my entire career trying to uphold that principle. Cases like this one remind me why it matters, why we cannot allow exceptions for individuals who carry badges, possess wealth, or have powerful connections. Because the moment we begin treating certain people as deserving of special consideration, we undermine everything that gives justice its meaning. Chief Robert Morrison believed he was above the law. He believed his badge was a shield rather than a responsibility. He believed his connections would insulate him from consequences. He believed he could intimidate his way to safety. He was wrong. His badge carried responsibility, accountability, and an obligation to a higher standard. When he violated that trust, the system responded exactly as it should have. His own officers stood against him. They chose justice over loyalty. That is what genuine police work looks like. That is what courage looks like.